Okay, so next month, Damon Lindelof's Watchmen comes to HBO. We are literally 29 days away from its release, and I am hyped to see what happens with it. I am hyped to see what comes to this show because I'm a big fan of the movie, and I do like the graphic novel, but I view them as separate entities, and I enjoy them as separate entities. But I'm curious to see if this more follows the book or if this more follows Zack Snyder's film, and I think it's going to be more the latter than the former. And that actually seems to make the most amount of sense because the general audiences of today are probably going to be more keen to know about Zack Snyder's version than anything else. But what is going on with it? What's some details we find out here from this interview? That Damon Lindelof drops some details on the Watchmen series, and you either are going to like it or you are not going to like it. I don't think there's quite much of a middle ground on this one, but let's dive in. So, the Watchmen series focuses on Angela Abar, played by Regina King, an Oklahoma police detective with the secret superhero identity of Sister Night. Abar finds herself investigating in the reemergence of a white supremacist terrorist group who has been inspired by Rorschach. Entertainment Weekly has a few new details, including a short explanation on the alternate history which has developed over the decades. Now, that was actually one of the key things with the original Alan Moore and David Gibbons novel, or graphic novel, was the alternate history. And that kind of played in quite heavily with the movie and everything else. And I think it worked out well, even though it wasn't fully explained, I think, in the movie. People still got the gist of it. But this is going to be a continuation of that to see where things go. Now, it says here that Robert Redford has been president for 28 years. Cell phones and the internet are outlawed. What? That makes no sense. That makes very little sense. Okay. Technology doesn't tend to regress itself, but let's continue. Fossil fuels are a thing of the past. Costumed heroes were popular, then banned. Police wear masks to protect their identities and cannot use their guns without a dispatcher unlocking them first. Reparations were issued for racial injustice, and our country remains ever divided. Wow. Now that comes across as a totalitarian government, does it not? That sounds like an insane totalitarian government. Cops can't use their guns, but their identities are still protected. Isn't that weird? I mean, that is something we saw in the trailer. They can't use their guns, but everything's still protected. So that's kind of funny. And then reparations, which is a big topic of conversation in regards to this current presidential election, is now being given. And I'm going to be very, very curious to see how that actually plays out. So going on to say here, Entertainment Weekly also spoke with Watchmen showrunner Damon Lindelof, who explained why he wanted to take on the difficult job of adapting Watchmen. Oh, why? But he's a little cheeky here when he says here, I asked my therapist that question on a weekly basis now. Why? Why Watchmen? First and foremost, this is something I love and something that made a very profound impression on me when I read it when I was 13 years old. In the same way, I wanted to work on Star Trek Into Darkness and the Alien movie, Prometheus. This is something from my childhood that carries a tremendous amount of nostalgia for. The fantasy I indulged in as a young man was maybe one day I can tell Watchmen stories. But do you really want to go back and say Star Trek Into Darkness and Prometheus? I mean, they're both kind of lauded as being not the best in regards to how they handled canon and how they handled some stuff and everything else. And then, he's kind of brought in to like be a script doctor for a lot of these things. And I don't know. I don't know. Prometheus, man, that whole third act. Oh, what were you doing, Lindelof? What were you doing? Now, I will say his third act of World War Z was good. I liked how it took it into more of a micro perspective than anything else. Anyway, Lindelof added that he turned down the opportunity several times before he decided that he could build upon the original story rather than simply rebooting it. Now, I respect that. He says here, we treat the original issues as canon. They all happened. We haven't done any revisionist history, but we can maneuver between the cracks and crevices and find new stories there. We wanted to make sure our first episode felt like the beginning of a new story rather than a continuation of an old story. That's what I think a sequel is, the continuation of an old story. But wait, what? I mean, so this is not a sequel. It's an what? Like, okay, fine. He doesn't want to do any revisionist history, but he wants to view this as a continuation of the story. Or he wants this to be a new story, not a continuation of the old story. It's kind of confusing, but what I think he's trying to say overall is they want it to be very much not, he wants it to feel new but old at the same time. It's so confusing. I mean, I get it. I think you get it. Anyway, moving on here. This is how he kind of describes the world of Watchmen for the TV show. It says here, we are living in a world that runs where fossil fuels have been eliminated as a power source. All the cars are zero emissions and run on electricity or fuel cells, largely thanks to innovations of Dr. Manhattan decades earlier. There's also legislation that's passed saying victims of racial violence legislation, which is a form of reparations that are colloquially known as Redfordations. It's a lifetime tax exemption of victims of and the direct descendants of designated areas of racial injustice throughout America's history. The most important of which, as it relates to our show, is the Tulsa massacre of 1921. That legislation had a ripple impact to another piece of legislation, DOPA, or the Defense of Police Act, which allows police to hide their faces behind masks because they were being targeted by terrorist organizations for protecting the victims of the initial act. Whoa, man. Look, I know that the original was meant to be political. Like, I know that it's meant to be political, but this is going to trigger some people. This is going to trigger some people. I think it's interesting how the Defense of the Police Act, right, which is basically Blue Lives Matter, and then the Tulsa massacre is going to probably be a bit of Black Lives Matter, and then you have the white nationalists coming in that are trying to take out the cops that are trying to protect. Oh, as if we don't already live in a political, like a political powder keg. Oh, this movie is going to anger some people. Or it's not a movie, it's a TV show. Oh my God. Holy crap, that's going to be a thing. Anyway, in regards to Robert Redford, Lindelof here was asked whether or not he had any concerns about turning a real person into a fictional president whose ideology leads to totalitarian society. And he says here, no, the short answer is yes. I've had lots of reservations about the creative choices I've made in the show. I don't think any of the choices were made without reservations and conversations and ultimately a decision. I'm not entirely sure I'll be able to defend every decision I made, but I'll be able to explain why I made it. We had conversation that you're suggesting, that the world of Watchmen is so heightened and so clearly it's an alternate history that it will be clear to everyone that we're not talking about the real Robert Redford. More importantly, the way we handle the story, you can't blame Robert Redford for everything that's happened in the world. The show says Redford has a liberal ideology, much like the actual Robert Redford, and he was incredibly well-intentioned in terms of the legislation he passed and the America he wanted to create, but that doesn't mean it worked out the way he wanted it to, and that's not on him, that's on us. So, I mean, obviously there's politics. You know, obviously there's some things here that I think he wants to say, and he's gonna use it kind of behind the veneer of Robert Redford. And that is Robert Redford, is he confirmed to actually come back and play himself? And that'd be great. I think it'd be great if he did. I don't know if he will. I don't know if he should, but it'd be great if he did. That'd be pretty damn funny. And I would applaud him immensely for it. But really, when it comes to the show, there's a lot there in regards to politics, in regards to heavy politics and things along those lines. And I think at the end of the day, it's going to either engage or enrage a lot of people. I would hope that people who become enraged by it stick along and watch all the way through the show, because who knows what comes from the end? We don't know yet. But then again, when you look at the original, graphic novel and then the movie, there were questionable things that were done in regards to ethics. And I think that's going to come into play here. And also maybe it mirrored a lot of the Cold War from back in the original graphic novel. And I think Lindelof is trying to apply today's politics through just an alternative lens. It also feels that elements of the show, like the Tulsa massacre and then the reparations, comes in line from HBO's other show that they were developing for a while called Confederate, which was that D.B. Weiss and David Benioff alternative history show where the South won the war. And that has kind of gone away, but that's gone away for a while. So we don't quite know yet just what's going to happen. But what we do know is that he ain't shying away from the politics. And if your audience is at all going to be people in liberal America, I think you're going to reach them perhaps. But if it's anything that's in like middle America or the South or conservative America, you're gonna anger a lot of people, Lindelof. And I think at this point in your career, you're kind of like Ryan Johnson in that regard. You simply just don't care. But what I care about is I care about what you guys have to say about this. So let me know down in the comments below what you think. Let me know. Let me know how this goes. I want to hear these things. I will talk to you all later. Please like and comment and subscribe and hit the bell and all that jazz. And patreon.com/Matt Jarbo is a great way to help out the channel. And have yourself a great day, guys. And peace out.